Good morning, everyone. Last week I started the program. I started teaching this unit 3 and probably you might have gone through all these things, whatever I had taught in the last two classes, and I think you are ready with your IS code. So just I am going to brush up quickly whatever I had earlier covered. To start with, I defined the beams and also mentioned about the types of beams. A beam is a structural member whose one of the dimensions is very large compared to the other two dimensions. And also it is said that the beam is a member which is subjected to transverse load. Then I discussed about the different types of beams such as singly reinforced beams, doubly reinforced beams, etc. Singly reinforced beams are the beams where the steel is provided in the tension zone only. Doubly reinforced beams are the beams where steel is provided both in the tension and compression zone. Like that, I discussed the different types of beams, and then I also covered the general specifications and practical requirements necessary for the design. And the other aspect which I covered in the last class is about the general aspects of serviceability. And I also mentioned that a beam is going to be designed based on the limit state of collapse, and further it is checked for the limit state of serviceability, where we have the deflection and cracking limit states. And I also said that I also discussed about the different methods that are normally used as per IS 456 for the check of deflection. To start with, I discussed about the empirical method, where I said that the actual L by D ratio should be less than the allowable L by D. The allowable L by D is calculated by using the formula L by D into basic multiplied by MT multiplied by MC and MF, where MT represents the modification factor to be used based on the tension reinforcement, and MC represents the modification factor based on the compression steel provided in the beam. And further, MF has to be taken into account. It is a reduction factor, and this has to be taken into account whenever we use the flanger sections. And whenever the beams have got spans more than 10 meters, further this has to be multiplied by 10 by span to arrive at the value of the allowable L by D. These values of MT, MC, MF are picked up from the graphs given in IS 456, figure number 4, 5 and 6. So this was our discussion in the last two classes. Till this point I had discussed. Now we shall continue to discuss on the limit state of serviceability for flexural members, that is the theoretical method. So today I am going to cover the theoretical method of checking the deflection, and also I am going to discuss about the cracking limit state, the limit state of serviceability in cracking, and finally we will be working out some problems on this deflection. So that is the agenda of the today's class. So now coming to this theoretical method, the theoretical method means you are going to calculate the actual deflection suffered by the beam because of the loading. Theoretically we are going to calculate the actual deflection. So this method is more accurate than the empirical method, and whenever there are any complicated loading, or whenever you are interested in knowing the precise results, whenever you are interested in precise results, then you have to go for this theoretical method. In this method, as I said, the actual deflection is calculated theoretically, and this value of the actual deflection should be lesser than the allowable deflection. In the earlier case, the allowable deflection was L by D, basic L by D into MT MCMF, but here it is not so. This is entirely different. The allowable deflection is calculated as L by 250, that is the final deflection due to all loads including the effects of temperature, creep, shrinkage should not exceed span by 250. And further, one more class is there. Deflection is checked at two different levels. The very first one I mentioned, that is L by 250, is the final deflection due to all the loads, whereas the deflection including the effects of temperature, creep and shrinkage occurring after erection of partitions and the application of finishes shall not exceed span by 350 or 20 mm, whichever is less. This is how we arrive at the value of the allowable deflection in the theoretical method. There is a big procedure to calculate the actual deflection the beam is suffering. That is, theoretically, whenever you want to calculate the actual deflection the beam suffers, you have to refer Appendix C of the code. The Appendix C, in the Appendix C, he clearly mentions about the step-by-step procedure for calculating the actual deflection. So, when I work out the problem, I am going to explain this in detail, but anyhow, now I am going to give some hints about the method of calculating the actual deflection. This method of calculating actual deflection consists of determining the short-term deflection as well as the long-term deflection. You very well know that there are some standard formulae to calculate the actual deflection. In fact, in structural analysis 1, several methods are there. Several methods have been taught to you to find out the actual deflection the beam suffers, like the moment area method, the conjugate beam method, etc. But in all these methods, probably you might have learnt how to calculate the actual deflection, and by this time I think you know the values of the actual deflection of some standard cases. For example, if you consider a simply supported beam with a concentrated load at the center with a span of L, the total span of the beam is L, the load acting is W. So, for a simply supported beam with a concentrated load acting at the center, you very well know that the maximum deflection occurs at the center, and this value of the actual maximum deflection at the center is given by the formula, or it can be derived as WL3 by 48 EI. One can observe that this maximum deflection the beam suffers depends upon the load acting, the span L, and the Young's modulus of elasticity of the material, and I represents the moment of inertia. So, this can also be written as a constant Kw as per the code. This constant 1 by 48 is replaced by Kw, and the final formula becomes delta max equal to Kw into WL3 by EI, where I represents the gas moment of inertia. This formula is valid, or this moment of inertia I is valid if the material is homogeneous. If you have the same material throughout, straight away one can easily calculate the value of I by simple formula like BD3 by 12. For a rectangular section, the moment of inertia I about the neutral axis is nothing but equal to BD3 by 12. But RCC is not a material where you can straight away write this BD3 by 12. Instead, you have to calculate the value of, you have to substitute the value of I effective. So, this calculation of I effective I am going to explain while working out the problem. So, the only thing I would like to concentrate now is not to substitute directly the value of I. Instead, please note that there is some other value I known as the I effective. So once you substitute the value of I effective in this formula, you can get the value of the maximum deflection the beam suffers. So this is how we calculate the short term deflection in case of this RCC beams. Further, to extend this, I am going to consider one more beam, a simply supported beam with a uniformly distributed load. I am going to take W kilonewton per meter run as the uniformly distributed load, and let L be the span. So you know that in this case the maximum deflection delta max is given by W 5 by 384 into W L to the power 4 divided by EI. In SP16 in the last page, if you refer, you are going to get all the standard formula. The same formula is going to be used to calculate the actual deflection the beam suffers. But the only difference is you are going to manipulate with this I. You cannot simply substitute the value of I as BDQ by 12 for a rectangular section. Instead, you have to substitute the value of I effective so that you get the actual value of deflection. Now, whatever I am talking about, the maximum deflection or whatever the formula I have written here is nothing but the short term deflection. Further, to this short term deflection, I am going to add the long term deflection. The long term deflection is because of the shrinkage, creep and temperature. All this can be calculated by using the relationships given in the IS code. In the Appendix C, Appendix C discusses in detail the procedure, it discusses in detail the procedure to determine the long term deflection, which is because of shrinkage, temperature and creep. So this I am going to explain when I take up the problem on this method of calculating the actual deflection or theoretical method of calculating the actual deflection. So I am going to discuss this while I solve the problem. Right now please understand that the deflection control in a rigorous way can be checked by using a theoretical method where the actual deflection the beam suffers is going to be calculated, and that's going to be compared with the allowable deflection like span by 250, span by 350 or 20 mm, whichever is less. So this is the procedure of checking the deflection by the theoretical method. So far I have discussed two methods. Number one, the empirical method. Number two, the theoretical method. Both these methods can be used, or any one of these methods can be used for the control of deflection in the design of RC beams. So now I said that in the last class I mentioned that the limit state of serviceability consists of both deflection and cracking. Deflection has been already covered, but now let us concentrate on this cracking. Probably you might not have seen any house without any crack. All these cracks develop because of several factors like variation or change in temperature, shrinkage, creep, etc. I am going to discuss this in detail in another 2 or 3 minutes. Right now please try to understand why there will be cracking, or when does this crack occurs. Cracking occurs when the tensile strength of the concrete is less than the tensile stress developed. So any beam when subjected to tension, it is going to crack. Only it is the tension that is responsible for cracking. Anything which is compressed will not get cracked. It may crack in the other direction, but normally in the beam anywhere, if you subject that to tension, then there are chances of the cracks to get developed. So for all tensions there won't be any crack. The cracking occurs only when the tensile strength of the concrete is lesser than the tensile stress developed. Concrete has got a certain tensile strength, and if you apply the load in such a way that the tensile stress developed is very, very large than the tensile strength of concrete, certainly there will be cracking of concrete. So after this, we shall try to understand the effects of cracking. What is this? What are the effects of cracking? Basically, the cracking may not make the structure to collapse, but it's going to harm the aesthetics of the structure. A building will not have cracks. If it exists, lot of cracks exist in a building, nobody is going to accept it. The user will feel discomfort. He may be afraid of cracks. So aesthetically, the cracks affect the aesthetics of the building. So nobody accepts any crack in any building. Now let us go to the other effect of the cracking, that is the durability. How does the durability get affected because of cracking? Large cracks, when present in any structural member, will invite the atmospheric effects to enter the structural member. A crack in a beam, a crack in a slab, if it is exposed to any atmosphere, is going to invite the bad effects, and the bad elements, the atmospheric elements is going to be invited to this, and further this causes the damage of the reinforcement. So whenever any reinforcement is exposed to both air and water, the corrosion takes place. So the wide cracks will make the reinforced cement concrete to get corroded. So when the corrosion occurs, you very well know that the whole beam gets weakened. So the durability of the member gets affected. The durability will be very less, and finally the beam may collapse. So indirectly the cracking is going to affect the strength of the reinforcement by corroding the reinforcement, thereby the durability gets decreased. So like that, I have discussed 2 points under this effects of cracking. Finally, the last point is very important. It's going to affect the basic function of the structural member itself. For example, if you take a liquid retaining structure, a water tank made out of reinforcement concrete, whenever there is a small crack in the water tank, what happens? So the basic function of the water tank is to retain the water inside, but all this water just passes through these cracks. The basic function itself gets affected because of cracks. So cracking not only affects the aesthetics of the building, but also it affects the durability of the structural member, as well as the basic function itself can be affected. So one should be very careful about the eliminating, or one should be very careful about the cracking that develops in any building. Now, why does this cracking happens? The cracking occurs due to large values of the following. Earlier itself, I mentioned that it is the tensile stress which is responsible for any cracking. So you very well know that when any beam is subjected to any bending, there will be bending stresses, bending tensile stresses in one of the zones, and bending compressive stresses in the other zone. These are known as the flexural tensile stress or the flexural compressive stress. The simply supported beam below the neutral axis, when subjected to any kind of external load like UDL or concentrated load, the bottom zone will be subjected to tension. Tensile stresses along the longitudinal fiber develops, and these flexural tensile stresses, if it is large, if it has got a large value of flexural tensile stress greater than that of the tensile strength, this is going to cause cracking. So the first point, I think I understood. It says that the flexural tensile stress, because of excessive bending under the applied load, whenever it achieves a large value that is greater than the tensile strength of the concrete, the cracking takes place. Now coming to this diagonal tension due to shear and torsion. Torsion You very well know that it's a cast because of the twisting moment applied in a vertical plane perpendicular to the longitudinal axis is the torque. So torque causes torsion. Torsion is resisted by shear, and already there is a shear force at a particular section. So both these are individually, they may cause the diagonal tension in any member. So because of the shear, there will be diagonal tension. You might have studied this in your strength of materials, where whenever any small element like this, if it's considered and if it is subjected to pure shear like this will cause diagonal tension. This diagonal tension also causes crack. So any pure shear will give rise to tension along one of the diagonals. In the other direction there will be compression. So now, as far as cracking is concerned, we are worried about this diagonal tension which develops because of the shear or torsion. And in some cases, like water tank or like cylindrical water tanks or cylindrical members, there will be hoop tension developed all around the circumference of the member. So this hoop tension also causes the tensile stresses, which again will try to cause the cracks in a building or cracks in the structural members. And further, don't be under the impression that the compression will not create any crack. Let us take a very simple case of cube subjected to any axial compression like this. So when this is subjected to any axial compression like this, or when a cube is subjected to axial compression, what happens to the stresses in all the perpendicular directions? Because of the Poisson's ratio effect, there will be lateral tensile stresses. So when you apply compressive force, there will be lateral tensile stress or tensile strains, and again this is responsible for the cracks to occur in any member. So 4 or 5 reasons already are given. Further we have some more reasons, like if you try to restrain the change that is going to occur in the volume, if you are trying to apply some pressure and at the same time if you are trying to restrain this, then again there will be tensile stresses. Any restraint against volume changes is also going to cause the cracks. And finally, there are things like bond and anchorage failures which are also responsible for the cracks. So cracks happens or cracks occurs because of several reasons which have been discussed so far. Now, what is this permissible crack width? All cracks are not structural cracks, and further, a small crack in the building, if it is there, you cannot say that the building has become obsolete and it has reached its limit state. The code permits some crack widths. So this permissible crack width again depends upon the type of structure as well as the exposure conditions. So now in page number 67 of the IS 456, please open this page number 67 of the IS 456, where it clearly mentions about the permissible crack width values. So when the type of exposure or when it is protected, when the structure is protected and not exposed to aggressive environmental conditions, a crack width of around 0.3 mm is allowed. Did you understand this? So when the whole structure is protected and further it is not exposed to any aggressive conditions, then a crack width of around 0.3 mm is allowed. So aggressive conditions does not exist in Mysore or Bangalore. In a place like Bangalore, the exposure conditions is very aggressive. Environmental exposure is very aggressive in all those coastal areas. Whereas in a place like Mysore or Bangalore, the aggressive conditions does not exist. or in building in Mysore or Bangalore, if the building is protected, then the maximum crack width allowed is 0.3 mm. In the moderate conditions, the crack width is a crack width of around 0.2 mm is allowed. In the aggressive conditions, like in a building in a coastal area, the maximum crack width allowed is 0.1. So, one has to understand the permissible crack width so that one can know whether the building has reached its limit state of serviceability in cracking, whether the building has reached its particular limit state of serviceability in cracking. Now, as I discuss about the control of deflection, now I am going to discuss about the control of cracking. There are two methods, again, there are two methods to calculate or to know whether the cracking is within the limits or not. So, the control of cracking is done by two methods. This is prescribed in the code. One is the theoretical method, the other one is the empirical method. What do you understand by this theoretical method? Earlier, while discussing the theoretical method of deflection, I said that it is going to be calculated based on some formula. Similarly, again we have some formula to know the crack width WCR. So, this is given in the code. So, compute the value of the crack width based on the formula given there in the code. So, this calculated value of the crack width, if it is lesser than the permissible values which has been already discussed, then this method of the control of cracking is known as the theoretical method. So, there are two methods, one is the theoretical method, the other one is the empirical method. So, in theoretical method we are going to actually calculate the crack width by using the formula given there in the code, and further if it is lesser than the permissible values which has been already discussed, then we say that it is safe against cracking. Then I said that the control of cracking can also be done by the empirical method. What is this control of cracking by empirical method? If proper detailing is followed, that is the spacing in the spacing of the reinforcement, the maximum spacing, the minimum spacing, etc. If it is followed properly, then one can control the crack. In other words, suppose you have a beam like this. Let us assume the width of the beam as 450 mm. Let us also assume that this beam requires a steel of AST equal to around 490 mm square. So, amount of steel required, this has been calculated based on the moment which we shall discuss in detail when we take up the problems on the design of beams. So, right now let us assume that we have got or we have arrived at a value of AST required to be provided as a beam to take care of the flexure as 490 mm square. So, now you very well know that the number of bars required is nothing but equal to the amount of steel AST divided by the area of one bar. Whatever the bar diameter you chose, you take the area of that bar and get the number of bars. In the first example, I am going to take the value of the bar diameter as 25 mm. The 25 mm diameter bar has got an area of 490 mm square. So, the number of bars required is equal to 1 only. So, without any knowledge of all this cracking etc., just by knowing the theory, I have calculated the value of the number of bars required and I have decided to use 25 mm diameter bar one number to take care of the flexure bar. No doubt it's going to take the flexural tensile stresses, but as far as the cracking is concerned, it will not help us, and therefore you should know the maximum spacing in a bar between the bars, in a beam between the bars, and as far as possible you should try to provide more number of bars so that the cracks that get developed the cracks that get developed will be lessened. So instead of providing one bar, if you provide a bar of 16 mm diameter, you can go for 3 bars. So this particular case of 3 bars is going to control the crack better than the other one where I had provided only 1 bar of 25 mm diameter. So like this, one has to know the proper detailing in order to control the cracking. Detailing is nothing but the art of placing the steel. The art of placing the steel is known as detailing, which you are going to study in your next semester. So while placing the steel, you have to understand that proper spacing, giving respect or giving weightage to all the specifications of the code, one has to detail the beam so that you can avoid the cracks. So by proper detailing, you can control the cracks. Next, let us consider a deep beam like this. Sorry, it cannot be called as a deep beam, a beam with large depth. You are not going to study the deep beam now. So now I have considered a beam of large depth. Let us say this is around 1000 mm. This is known as the flange. Let us take the flange width as 100 mm, and now the depth of the web of this beam becomes 900 mm. Beams of this type is going to laterally buckle, and there will be cracks in this beam because of the large depth. In order to control this cracking because of the large depth, one has to provide the side face reinforcement in addition to the tension steel as well as the compression steel. This compression steel and the tension steel, they are going to take care of the bending stresses. The flexural design, they are going to take care of the flexural stresses or the bending stresses. However, this may not be required to take care of the flexure, but still to control the cracks, we have to provide the side face reinforcement. The code clearly says that provide the side face reinforcement whenever the depth of the web is greater than 750 mm. In case of the L beams, this is restricted to 450 mm. So this detailing has to be followed whenever we have large depth beams. So like this, if you give importance to this detailing aspects, one can avoid the cracking. All this comes under this empirical method. Further, already I have discussed this with an example. Large number of smaller diameter bars is better than large diameter bars of same area. So instead of using one of 25 mm diameter bar, one can use 3 bars of 16 mm diameter or 2 bars of 16 mm and 1 bar of 12 mm. However, the minimum spacing shall be provided, taking care that minimum spacing to be provided, one has to provide large number of smaller diameter bars instead of large diameter bars of same area. In addition, one should also take care of the minimum steel to be provided. Concrete, if you simply place it without any steel, what happens? After a certain time, you can try this in your laboratory, it starts cracking. Under some load, definitely it is going to crack. Under its self weight itself, it may crack. To avoid all these cracks, I am going to provide some minimum amount of steel. The code says you have to provide a minimum amount of steel of 0.85 times B into D divided by 0.87 Fy. So you have to take care of all these things while you want to control the cracking of beams by empirical method. In page number 46, class 2651, IS 456, this minimum amount of steel to be provided is given, according to which we have AST min equal to 0.85 times B into D divided by 0.87 times Fi, where B is the width of the beam, D is the effective depth, Fi is the yield stress. For Fe 415 steel, the value of Fi is 415 newtons per mm square. In addition to this, the AST min also provides some ductility to the reinforced cement concrete beams, thereby avoiding the sudden failure. So this AST min is required for two purposes. One is to avoid the cracks, the other one is to see that the sudden failure is avoided. So now, after having discussed this limit state of cellulosic cracking, now let us start working out the problem on the deflection. So today as well as in the next hour, that is on Monday the 3rd September, I am going to work out some problems on this deflection. Further on Tuesday and Wednesday, that is 4th and 5th, I will be discussing about 4th I will be working out the problems on cracking. 5th I am going to discuss about the procedure for the design of beams. That is the unit 4 will be discussed on Wednesday, that is 5th September. Right now we shall work out the problem on the deflection. Based on the empirical method, one can expect this particular type of problem in any question paper. So a very simple problem which consists of only 10 marks, whereas if you or another problem can be said where you are going to calculate the deflection by using the theoretical method. Normally that will be of 20 marks. So now let us start the first problem of my sessions. Okay. So I am going to first of all read out the problem. I think you can note down the different data given there. The data is very simple. To start with, I have taken a simply supported T-beam. Already I have explained the meaning of T-beam. A T-beam is the one which has got flanges on both the sides. An L-beam is the one which has got flange on only one side. So given the following data of a simply supported T-beam, you can note down this. Given the following data of a simply supported T-beam, check the deflection criteria by empirical method. Once again I will repeat it. Given the following data of a simply supported T-beam, check the deflection criteria by empirical method. So now I am going to write the, first of all you note down the problem. Later on I am going to solve this problem on the board. So the data given are width of the beam. Normally we use small b to denote this width. So width of the beam equal to 230 mm. The effective depth within the brackets small d, which is nothing but the notation used for effective depth, and that is equal to 425 mm. Probably the overall depth is nothing but equal to 450 mm, assuming a cover of 25 mm. Let us not bother about it right now. So the width of the beam 230 mm, the effective depth 425 mm, the effective span 8 meters. I think you are all taking down this. Area of tension steel required 977.5 mm square. Right now you will be surprised to directly note down this area of tension steel, but while working out or while designing the beams you are going to arrive at the value of the area of tension steel required. So in this problem directly I have given the value of the area of tension steel required. One can easily calculate this. All these things will be shown when we design the beams. area of tension steel provided. Required is 977.5 mm square. Area of tension steel provided equal to 1256 mm square. Area of compression steel provided 628 mm square. Type of steel Fe415. Width of the flange denoted by BF, written within the brackets B suffix F, the width of the flange equal to 0.9 meters. Width of the web B suffix W equal to 0.3 meters. So this is the data given. So I am going to write down all this, whatever data given here, and further we have to check the deflection based on the empirical method. A very simple problem. One can expect this problem in the examination. A typical question paper consists of this problem, but this is of 10 marks. So note down whatever the data given here in the problem, like B equal to 230 mm, small d equal to 425 mm, effective span LE equal to 8 meters. So the solution starts with writing of whatever the data given in the problem. AST, we use the notation AST for the tension steel, area of tension steel. AST required is 977.5 mm square. Then AST provided or 1256 mm square. Type of steel, the moment I say type of steel, you can just note down the value of Fy, which is nothing but equal to 415 newtons per mm square. Flange width BF equal to 0.9 meters, then the web width BW equal to 0.3 meters. So this is the data given, and now let us go to the next step. So in the next step you are going to calculate the value of the allowable L/D ratio. With whatever data you have, you are going to calculate the allowable L/D ratio. Already in the previous class I have explained the method of calculating the allowable L/D. In order to find out the value of the allowable L/D ratio, one has to know the value of the basic L/D, and this shall be multiplied by the modification factors MT, MC and MF. Whatever that I have written on the right hand side of the equation shall be picked up from the code. So if you refer this class 23.2.1 of the code, it clearly says that the basic L/D for a simply supported beam is nothing but equal to 20. For a simply supported beam, the value of the basic L/D ratio is nothing but equal to 20. Had it been a continuous beam, I would have written the basic L/D as 26. Had it been a cantilever, I would have picked up the value 7 as the basic L/D ratio. So the very first thing is to just pick up the value of basic L/D, which depends upon the nature of the support. For a simply supported beam, it is nothing but equal to 20. Then you have to get the value of MT. So one has to refer figure number 3 to arrive at the value of MT. In figure number 3, please open this figure number 3 of the code. In figure number 3, the values of PT are given along the x-axis and the value of MT is given along the y-axis, and there are several curves like this, each curve representing for different values of Fs, for a particular value of Fs. So, referring this figure number 3, for a particular value of PT you are going to, and for a particular value of Fs you are going to pick up the value of MT. So, to refer this code one should know the value of PT. What is the value of PT? The value of AST is given. You know the formula to calculate the value of PT. PT is nothing but AST into 100 divided by width into the effective depth. So now, if you substitute the value of AST as 1265 mm square, this is the actual steel provided, this is the actual amount of percentage of tension reinforcement provided. If you substitute the value of AST as 1256 and if you use the values of B and D, you are going to get the value of the percentage of tensile reinforcement as 1.30%. So like this, you should also calculate the value of PC. Right now, let us not bother about PC, let us calculate the value of PT. After having calculated the value of PT, now let us go to the next step where one has to get the value of Fs. To refer this figure number 3, you need to know the value of PT as well as Fs. So Fs is nothing but equal to 0.58 times Fy multiplied by area of steel required divided by area of steel provided. These two things are given in the problem. So the area of tensile steel required is 977.5 mm square, area of tensile steel provided is 1256 mm square. So knowing these two areas, substituting this in the formula Fs, you can go to the graph 3 of IS 456 and get the value of MT. Sorry, it is figure number 4. So 4, 5 and 6 gives the values of MT, MC and MF. So from figure 4, for PT equal to 1.3% and for Fs equal to 187.3 newtons per mm square, you can get the value of MT. So after referring this, the value of MT has been got as 1.1. So this, in this formula I am going to substitute the value of 1.1. I think you have understood this method of picking up the value of MT from figure number 4. Next, let us calculate the value of PC. You know the value of ASC. As usual, by using the same formula, ASC into 100 divided by B into D, you calculate the value of PC. Refer figure 5 to get the value of MC. So figure 5 gives the value of MC, which in this case has come to 1.15. Now let us go to the next figure 6, where you are going to pick up the value of MF. So for BF by BW, calculate the value of, you know the value of BF, you know the value of BW. So for this BF by BW, you can get the value of MF, which has come to 0.80 in this case. So substitute all these things in figure number, in equation which has been already given. So the allowable LBD is nothing but equal to 20 into 1.1 into 1.15 into 0.8, that is 20.2. The actual LBD is nothing but equal to 8000. Note down the actual LBD. I had not written this on the board. The actual LBD is L 8000 divided by 425, which comes to 18.82, whereas allowable LBD is 20.2. Therefore, we say that this particular beam has satisfied the deflection criteria. So in the today's class, I have covered about the limit state of serviceability in cracking, and further I have worked out a problem on the empirical method of calculating the deflection. So in the tomorrow's class I am going to continue with the other things.